Well, not yet. It's not. Settle down.
Okay. Thank you, and thanks everybody for participating. My name is Andy McCarthy, and I am a reference librarian in the Milstein division of U.S. History, Local History, and Genealogy. We're located in the Stephen A. Schwartzman building. That's the Central Library on 42nd Street and 5th Avenue, right there in Midtown. Some of you might have visited, or maybe you've contacted us, but hopefully by the end of this, you will be encouraged and urged to at least contact us with questions that you have on these subjects. And I'll talk a little bit about the division, kind of start off, but there's the building there. Our division, U.S. History, Local History, and Genealogy, is one of several in the Central Library, which essentially covers the humanities and social sciences. Those are the terms that they use for the scope of the collections. There is an art and architecture division, which part of that is the picture collection, where you can check out all these images that are cataloged in numerous ways. These are, a lot of this stuff is digitized, but I'll talk about that as we go. And our division is a sibling. It's a sibling division with the Dorot Jewish collections and the map division. And if anyone's done even cursory genealogy or local history research, maps pretty quickly will or typically are involved. So we're sort of, like I said, we're sort of we all come under the same umbrella. I would urge everyone, since you are, I'm just assuming, New York State residents, to get a library card. You don't have to be a resident of New York City. New York State technically is the scope. When people are coming into the library, they can be from out of state as long as they have a photo ID. But that's on site. You know, we even give library cards to people who come in who are from New Jersey, if you can believe that. You know, that's how liberal these policies are. This is the commemorative Lou Reed library card here, when the library, the Manuscripts and Archives Division acquired the Lou Reed papers, Long Island's own. Oh, and with that, I'm going to talk about our subscription databases, but one of the benefits of getting a library card is there's a lot of remote access that is available. So it's not just using it to come in and check out material, but you can use subscription databases and a lot of other things. So there's a lot of advantages, and that you can do on the website, nypl.org. There's a link at the top of every page, get a library card. So I'm going to talk about our division with a certain amount of specificity on genealogy. First, I'm going to talk about research methods before getting to the actual materials, the actual stuff, and a little bit of an overview of local history. You know, what are we talking about here? And then ways of accessing the stuff in our division, the actual collections, because all these things play off one another. And then, as always, if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the Q&A, and at the end, we can field your questions based on the slides, based, you have anything that I didn't cover, or you came to this, you were wondering about something, but I didn't talk about it, just questions. That's what, as a reference librarian, that's what we do. So we'll leave a good chunk of time at the end for questions. I am going to repeat ongoing to email us. You know, if you have future questions, if you're in the middle of your genealogy research, or you have questions about local history or US history, New York City history, New York State history, email us, history@nypl.org. I'm going to have that up on the screen. I can't stress this enough. That is a really good segue into what we do. So I'm a reference librarian. My colleagues and I answer questions, and the bulk of the questions that we get are remote via email. And that's mostly because right now the library is open to the public, but the division itself has limited access. You can only use the reading room if you're using library material, or if you're using library databases. So the subjects that we cover, it's right there: US history, local history, genealogy. People come to us with questions about the history of New York City, and like I said, the history of New York State. and a lot of the good amount of the collections cover this. But you have questions about a county in California, right, or New Jersey, right, or Ohio. It covers all 50 states. And another popular question that we get specific to New York City is people researching their buildings. But if you had a question about this, with where you live in Long Island or somewhere in New York State, we can answer that too. So I would encourage people to reach out. And you see here, this is from a recent documentary with Martin Scorsese made with Fran Lebowitz. And there they are at the doors of the Milstein division, looking kind of apprehensive, looking a little bemused, not sure. Soon enough, they're browsing the stacks and they're smiling with their joyous research experience, which is a perfect way to capture what it's like engaging the Milstein division. So we are not an archive. Our collections are basically made up of books, and books, newspapers, periodicals, pamphlets, bound material, secondary sources. But also a good amount of our collections are subscription databases, newspaper databases, databases the library pays for so that patrons can use them with a library card from home or on site. Right? So they are, some of them are, a good amount of them are exclusive. Periodical databases and genealogy databases, in particular, Ancestry Library Edition. Ancestry is the earth mother of genealogy databases. They add new things to it all the time. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. But that's one of these count as the collections. So it's a lot, image collections. We collect local histories and family histories that have been published, over the last, 2 centuries, essentially. City directories are very popular, although city directories for counties and cities and town all over the US, in particular, New York City and New York State, a lot of these are digitized. This is another reason to reach out to us. And I'll talk more about these a little bit in detail later. But I also don't want to just stress the stuff. I mean, that's the stuff. People come in, they say, what do you have here that can help my, help my research? Well, it depends on your research question. Part of the experience of the library and sort of overarching over the collections are the librarians. So taking advantage of the librarianship is using the library just as much as if you were checking out books or using telephone directories on microfilm. You want to ask us questions. We have, this makes us better librarians. It gives us more experience, right, for next time to build on, to evolve. And a lot of times it's less about the material that you're using than the way you're approaching it. Research methods, and that's what I'm going to talk about next, that we can kind of foster with patrons. And we have a very wide-angled purview as far as our reference acumen, right? It's not just genealogy, it's not just New York City history, it's not just US history. These all play off one another so that people ask questions, they say, I've tried everything, I hit the brick wall. Well, you can hit the brick wall, but that doesn't mean you've tried everything. There's always something else, right? There's always something else. And there's always a way of looking at what you already have, that you say, oh, I've been looking at this for so long, but then a new thing pops out. And that's one of the things librarians can help out with. I'd encourage everybody to go to our homepage, the homepage for the Milstein division. If you just Googled it, NYPL Milstein division, you get there. It has, access procedures, contact information. Right now, our classes, we were doing online classes. We migrated we do a lot of different public on-site classes that we then migrated during the quarantine online on all different kinds of subjects that are popular, that reflect the popular questions that we get. African-American genealogy, building research, how to use the census, researching vital records, things like that, things that we get a lot of questions about, then we do classes because we know people are curious about them. When the schedule pops up again, that'll be on the website. Also, there are a ton of research guides. There's our blog, which, that regards subjects that we deal with, New York City history, things like that. But there are also a number of research guides that break down how to use certain resources and the steps involved in using these resources. So check out the website if you're curious. And again, history@nypl.org is the contact info. Calling on the phone, it's not, that really is not recommended because it can be a very busy reference desk. And so it's difficult, the patrons at the desk take priority, and answers can be complicated. Questions are often complicated, and the answers are complicated. And sometimes it's tough to convey that just over a simple telephone call. Whereas an email, you can kind of lay out the bullet points, put links in. It's much more comprehensive. So we're not saying don't call us because we're antisocial or anything. We have to be. Well, we can't be too social, otherwise we just be yapping away with patrons and never get anything done. That's you do at a bookstore if you work at a bookstore, not the library. Okay, so research methods. Before I get to the materials, part of you say, well, I want to hear, what does the library have? Well, the library has a lot of stuff, but it means nothing. It's useless without the proper approach. And these research methods are, on one end, specific to genealogy research, but they really apply to any research that you're doing for the most part, most of it. Now, some of you may be advanced in your genealogy research. This could work as a refresher. Others may be beginners. And I pulled a lot of this from our Getting Started in Genealogy class that we do every month. So you want to talk to your relatives. You want to talk to people who are around. Talk to anybody that might have any piece of information. Talking to relatives can be difficult. Sometimes they don't want to talk. Sometimes they talk too much. They don't shut up, but they're not saying anything that's pertinent, relevant, or interesting, right? There are guidebooks on how to talk to, how to approach family members when you're conducting genealogy research, but it will give you something to go with, to start with. It doesn't mean that it's accurate, but it's something as a springboard. And especially, when, well, so-and-so said this, grandma said this, but my uncle said that. Well, it's something to work with. Always keep in mind that there are numerous guidebooks on genealogy, on getting started in genealogy on a broad level, and then there's stuff that is very, very specific, to ethnicity, to race, to certain types of material, how to search naturalization records, right? It goes on and on and on. So a good bulk of our collections are guidebooks, and that's a big resource that we will often suggest to people. Someone will come in and say, I traced my great-grandfather back to Italy, but then I'm not sure what to do. Well, we have a bunch of guidebooks on tracing genealogy in Italy and resources in Italy. So things like that, keep that in mind. And also, which I have here, I put detective skills. That's really just this idea of sometimes the guidebooks will help you approach these materials, give you a sense of how to think about your proceeding with your genealogy research rather than just using the stuff itself. You want to start one thing at a time. People come in a lot. They say, I'm looking for information on my great-grandfather, whatever you have. Well, everything is information, right? So you got to specify, look at what you have. A lot of times, when you organize what you have, you realize that you have more than you think you do. Then you look for the gaps. You say, oh, well, I don't have, her maiden name. Well, that's one piece of information. You start with that, one thing at a time. Once that's done, pick it off, move to the next thing. This will make it easier for you to ask research question. And it'll also save you a headache because, you know, you get all disorganized, or I'm looking for the one thing at a time. And as you sort of do step by step, put everything in order, maybe create a pedigree chart, noting all the relationships, you'll start to see patterns. Things, the figure in the carpet starts to emerge, and things will start to make more sense, and you'll feel very, you know, organized, and you'll be able to proceed, you know, move forward, which with much better dispatch. You know, rather than having everything all over the place, you know. And as far as how to think about things, you know, another suggestion is to write things out. You know, write something out in paragraph form, or sort of get your thoughts down, ideas on paper about all these connections, right? This works as like a review process. You also want to, some of you may have realized this already as you do your research, that there are one of the patterns that comes pretty quick in genealogy research is how materials and resources are arranged. And then by extension, how you're thinking about this research. It's a time, a date, right? A when, and then it's a where. And then it's the type of resource it is. So you say, well, and this will tell you what's available, what records are available, and how then to find them. So I'm looking for so-and-so's address at the turn of the century in, you know, Nassau County. And so, well, where are you going to find somebody's address? You would find it in city directory. A city directory is the type of material, right? When, right? City directories are published every year. Do you have a date range of when you're looking for this person's address? Yeah, around 1900, 1901. Good. All right. And do you know where they were living? You don't have the address, but do you know where they were living? You say, oh yeah, I know it was I know it was Nassau County, because often the Nassau County, the city directories are by the county. Does a city directory exist for that year? Well, then you can. That's how you're asking yourself the question, and then you can. You're posed very nicely to then ask a question of a librarian or a researcher as well as you move forward. And this is a way of like I have here, thinking critically. And of course, as always, you start with the most recent and you move further and further back, right? And that is par for the course for a number of reasons. The more recent resources, and when I say recent in genealogy, you're talking, 50s is like pretty late. The 1950s, talking about, first half or so of the 20th century, stuff is more available and it's got much more information in it than a birth certificate or the census than in the early 1800s, as the further back you go, right? And they're more available often too. So all of this points towards asking a research question, because as you ask questions, you answer them, and then you move on next. And this is a way of gravitating towards guidebooks and being able to utilize librarians. So here's a great example of a solid research question. I want to know the year my grandfather immigrated to the US. So you have everything you need to determine, okay, what resource has a year of immigration, right? And so a city directory is not going to have that. So there's no use of looking into a city directory. There are also things that you need to know before you get to this. Maybe you're just starting out, but you're really interested in the immigration history of your relatives. You can't just go right to the immigration. You have to know certain things like when was the person born, or at least the ballpark, when did they die? So then you have a date range within which you're going to search for a resource that has a year of immigration. right? Where were they living? Where did they immigrate from? Right? These are all things that you will find in different types of genealogy records. But I'm pointing this out now is because a lot of times we have to manage the expectations of patrons who come in and they have a question like this, but they don't realize what you have to have first before you get there. You know, and again, these are one at a time. So next thing you know, you're on this research path just to answer this one question, but then you have all this information, boom. And a year of immigration can be in a number of different places. The census had it in there in 1900 and 1910 and 1920. The census is done every 10 years on the 10th year. It's widely available in different databases. And at least that's the main, but maybe maybe those censuses are too early or too late for when the person that you're researching immigrated. So, and like I was saying, managing expectations, you know, this a common question. I think anyone who works a reference desk anywhere that is related to genealogy, people come in, they want to type their name in the computer and see what comes up. Well, that is science fiction. That does not exist. You type your name into, you know, Ancestry, and a bazillion things are going to come up with other people with that name and things that sound like that name, and it makes no sense. And also, this makes it seem like the library is like, you know, the FBI in the J. Edgar Hoover era, that we have the master database of information on everyone. No, that's not how it works. You have to be prepared. You have to know what it is you're looking for. And well, you have to be prepared and you have to know what it is you're looking for. Like I said earlier, you can never try everything. You know, that's what librarians are here for, to say, well, try this, try that, try that. And you want to keep an open mind, because you can't, you know, say, did you try, I'm looking for so-and-so. And you say, well, did you try the ad? Did you try searching their name in a newspaper database? Oh, no, they wouldn't be. They're not going to be listed, mentioned in the newspaper. They weren't famous. They weren't that. Well, back in the day, you never know who or what is going to end up in the newspaper. They reported on tons of things. There's a lot of reasons somebody could end up in the newspaper. They were part of a club. They witnessed a crime. They were, you know, involved in a crime. I mean, it goes on and on and on. We do an entire class devoted to using newspapers in genealogy research. Again, like I said, right now, our classes are on hiatus, but they're a huge resource. And I'm using that as an example because, you know, if you're not going to try, if you search them in the newspaper, nothing comes up. Well, that didn't mean you wasted your time. That meant you searched them in the newspaper and you didn't find anything. There's your answer right there. And you need specificity. A lot of times people will say, you know, whatever you got, you know, I'm researching my great-grandfather. You know, what is it that you're looking for? Anything that you have. Well, we can't work with that. And then you're not going to make any, you're not going to make any headway that way. This is more, again, more sort of steps involved in honing your research question. Like I said earlier, everything is information. So you're not just looking for information, you're looking for a specific type or a specific piece of information. And you also want to base your questions, your approach on empirical data, on stuff that's based on what you found already. You know, I use this example here, you know, just because your last name is Minnelli doesn't mean you're related to Liza. But people will sometimes make that, you know, well, the last name's the same. I think I'm, you know, well, you have to have a basis for that. I don't know if because you can sing, you know, that doesn't mean that you're related to Liza either. I don't know if anyone can sing like her, except for maybe Judy. So realness. Base your questions on what came before, on empirical evidence-based, and all these examples I'm giving are based on common questions that we get. So you look at what you have. You'll often have more than you think, but the gaps will start to appear, and that's what you begin with, right? this is based on what you do and do not have. Right? You're not just pulling a question out of thin air. One by one, don't make any assumptions. You never want to say, well, they probably this, or I can't find a passenger list, so we probably jumped ship. Well, I don't know how often people jump ship. That's just an expression, and you don't want to make these assumptions. A lot of times, searching these records it's tricky. The indexing is very bad. The digital indexing, meaning that when you type in a name in the actual record, it's spelled wrong. So the person that indexed it in the database spelled it wrong, and so it doesn't show up when you type in proper spelling. Just as an example of why these databases can be tricky. So, doing genealogy research at New York Public Library. Some examples of our collections, and when I talk about this stuff, I want to sort of qualify it in that in genealogy research, what is super relevant to one person's research path will be completely irrelevant and useless to somebody else's, because it all depends on what you're looking for. So you say, oh, the New York Public Library has tens of thousands of local histories and family histories. Well, unless they are related to they have a piece of information related to what it is you're looking for based on your own family research or your own local history research, then what does it matter? That's why I was stressing the librarians, asking librarians questions. So here's some examples of of a family history. A lot of times these are things that are put together by researchers or enthusiasts, people that really get the bug for putting together family history volumes, and based on a certain locale. Here's one, New Jersey, and then this other one is specific to Lynn, Massachusetts, going all the way back to 1630, and then are published and bound. And this is the type of stuff we collect. And local histories. So this was related to family trees, a lineage. It's just like this sort of catalog of names and family connections. But then local histories usually are related to a certain type of resource, like or a certain specific locale. So you see here, you have this, someone went in and indexed these land records, colonial land records from where they're located in the New Jersey State Archives or something, and then published it. It's making it much more easier to access. And then here's a great example, Pickett County, Tennessee, this is a history of just this locale. And so it's going to have, all kinds of, biographical information and stuff about the founding and who owned property and the businesses and the churches and da 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 da. So that's just, you have, there's a lot of these in New York State. There's a ton. So just to get a sense of what I mean by a family history or a local history. The other thing about a family history is that, depending on how hardcore you're getting, it can really be beneficial to write things out, put things into a narrative context. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit when I talk about local history resources, but write it down, put it in print form. You can self-publish it, have it privately printed, and then donate a copy to the library, because you never know, on down the line somebody else may be doing research that a family member or a locale in what you wrote may be relevant to what they're doing. You never know moving forward. So you can always keep that in mind. Print indexes. So what are these? These are, let's see what I have on that. Yeah. So you have a resource, a passenger list, which is a list of everybody sailing from a locale into a port in the United States, everybody that's on the ship. They started collecting passenger lists officially in 1820. We do an entire class on researching passenger lists in genealogy research. But these can be tough sometimes to navigate. Now that things are digitized, it's a little easier. So publishers, historians, genealogists, whoever, over the years would index the passenger lists because they're in a certain kind of order, but not alphabetical by name. So they'd go in, index the passenger list, and then make it easier to find the person because the index is arranged by surname. Same with newspapers. Sure, there's a lot of newspapers that are digitized. They're easily keyword searchable, but there are tons, especially New York City and New York State newspapers, tons that are not digitized. How do you find somebody? How do you find someone in a newspaper if you can't keyword search it? You check to see if there's an index. And also with newspapers, I mean, sure, the New York Times is intensely indexed, but these smaller newspapers often are not, except someone might go in and, excuse me, say, marriage announcements in the whatever times between 1820 and 1870. So they have a certain date range, a certain type of marriage announcement, and then they take all those names, index them so you know where to find them in the newspaper. So that's what I'm getting when an idea of these print indexes. We have a lot of them on our open shelf and in our collections. You never know whether they're going to be relevant until you get to the point where you say, well, I wonder if there's a print index for that, for those naturalization, for the land records or whatever. So that's like taking something from a primary source that's unindexed, that could be impenetrable because it's not digitized, and then making it much more accessible. And often these things are arranged a certain way. So like I was talking about newspapers, this one is this big multi-volume set, blacks in selected newspapers include, and then they also have censuses in here too and other sources, but it's mostly newspapers. And so it's names of African-American individuals in a set collection of newspapers that otherwise you would not find, if stuff is not digitized. It's usually, there's a certain date range. So this is how do you, like I was saying, some stuff is going to be irrelevant to one person. The same thing is going to be gold to somebody else. That's how these things work. That's how research works in general, but especially when it comes to local history and genealogy. So these things are to make them more accessible, to make them more easily findable. So that like, oh, that doesn't pertain to what I'm doing, or no, that I need. Arranged by locale, arranged by ethnicity, sometimes by religion, by the type of record it is, like I was saying, passenger list, land records, newspaper, and then as always a date range. And I was saying this earlier, and it's always worth repeating, is that in genealogy, it's always about the date, the locale, and the type of resource. The 1915 New Jersey state census. New Jersey's the locale, 1915 is the year, the type of record, census. Right? New York State did state censuses too. City directories, I mentioned these because they are very, very popular. And they come in a lot of different forms. I don't know off the top of my head, I didn't put it in here, but for Long Island can be kind of tricky as far as the years that Suffolk and Nassau County are available. But if you are looking for a city directory in either of those locales, you can always reach out and to see what we have. Originally, these were published in print volume editions, and the library microfilmed the collection. And now most of the New York City, meaning Manhattan and the Bronx, are digitized and are at our, it's called NYPL Digital Collections. It's the site where the material in the library collections has been digitized, is searchable and findable. If you had questions about that, you could always email us about the city directories, because you can do an entire class, and we do an entire class on city directories. And what is a city directory? It's a list. So there's residential and there's business. So the residential city directory is a list of everyone living in that locale. As always, it's never, it can be often incomplete, but it gives it's arranged by surname. It gives the address, and it sometimes will give the address, give the occupation of the person, baker, laborer, shoemaker, and then sometimes give the teacher, sometimes give the address of the occupation as well. Around the 1920s, these were replaced by telephone directories. Telephone directories are not digitized for New York City, maybe for other states and cities, and the library has a big collection of telephone directories. And really only in the 20th, for the most part, only the 20th century. And again, I'm talking specifically about New York City. There are collections of these telephone directories arranged by the address. So you look up the address and you see everyone who's living there. So they come in, depends on the year and the locale, about how they're accessible. You say, oh, these are only on microfilm, or they're only in the print edition. Or you say, oh, they're digitized at Ancestry, or they're digitized on the library's website. This is there's a lot of information in a directory. And in addition to individuals or the location of a business, the 19th century directories and early 20th century directories have this section of municipal information about, the politicians and the police precincts and all locations of schools and churches and houses of worship, things like that. Addresses of clubs and organizations, municipal info, civic data, and you never know when these things come in, when they'll come in handy. Another resource, newspapers. I was kind of going on about these. As far as New York Public Library, we have a good handful of newspaper databases. So this ProQuest, that's this company, and they have digitized bazillions of pages of U.S. and international newspapers. The Times, New York Times is in there, the Daily News, and Newsday, which is 1940 onward, which covers Long Island. They're digitized at ProQuest. Newspapers.com. I have newspaper.com. It's newspapers.com. That's a subscription database that you can get from home with a library card. So, if you can't get some of these newspaper databases at your local library, you can apply for a New York Public Library card and access some of these from home. Newspapers.com they got bazillions of pages on there as well. And they're good at US newspapers, like small US newspapers to big US newspapers, really extensive. And some of these other ones here, the Staten Island Historical Newspapers is a project that the library did where they digitized the different Staten Island microfilm collections. But for, New York City, New York State, that was this like hub of newspaper publishing. A lot of these titles are not digitized, and they're only available on microfilm. And so the library's newspaper microfilm collections are much more extensive than the digitized material. But again, as always, it depends on the where and it depends on the when. So always keep in mind, I was highlighted these two because people use city directories and newspapers all the time. So local history, what do I mean by local history? Well, this is the stuff that gives dimension to your genealogy research. Because genealogy, it's so-and-so was related to so-and-so and so-and-so's cousin, and then the brother, and then the uncle, and sometimes it can seem, no, it's personal to you and it means something to you, absolutely. But it doesn't, it needs context. It needs some kind of narrative girth. That's where local history comes in. It rounds things out with regional history, social history, political history. What was the neighborhood like? And this is a common question. You say, well, I found out, where my great grandparents were living and and I want to know what did the neighborhood look like? What was the demographic character? Was it populated? was it, was it working class? Da, 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 da. Like what, you want to round things out. You're painting a picture, researching the building that they live in. I found out where they live. Now I want to research where they live. It's historical research for sure. It's the kind of thing that anytime you watch a TV show or a movie that's set in a historical period, those producers and showrunners are doing local history research. And a lot of them, well, maybe I shouldn't say a lot, but these people will use our collections too, for sure, And okay, so how do you find out this stuff? Well, whereas genealogy is kind of, it is specific to certain types of resource, the census, done every 10 years on the 10th year, city directories, birth, marriage, death certificates. Local history, hey, if it's something that yields a piece of information that you found useful, it counts as a resource. That could be, it could be a matchbook, it could be a business card, right? A cocktail napkin, from 50 years ago. Did it add a little dimension to your research? Did it give it some context? Then there you go. Now, typically, at the same time, like I was talking about specific local histories, which, around the end of the 19th century, after the Civil War, a lot of, places in the United States kind of hunkered down and wanted to kind of establish a local identity. And it was a common practice to found historical societies and then write these local histories about the neighborhood, about the area, about figures in the neighborhood, businesses that behind the, or industries behind the founding of the county, the area, et cetera. And, this make up a good bulk of our collection. Guidebooks in a certain era. Now, sure, guidebooks, they kind of have a dual role where they're, at the time that they're published, they're there to help you, point out points of interest or what an area is like, or city, whatever. But they also are great sources for historical research because they really give you a sense of a place and time in ways that you're not going to find in other resources. So always keep, you can keep in mind guidebooks. And so I have all these other examples here, image resources, menus, someone's memoirs, right? Some personal narrative is the term that the library catalog often assigns these things. So local history, and in our collections, and I'm just going to sort of breeze over this. We have these are less secondary sources, basically printed matter collections, clippings files related to the history of New York City that librarians collected over the years that are arranged by subject. Well, I'm going to go into this in a minute. All these different ones. The political ephemera. This is a flyer of a guy from the Lower East Side in the early '90s running for mayor, Arthur Johnson. Our image collections. People are often looking for pictures of old buildings in New York City, but the digital collections, the digitized images from the library collections that are online at NYPL digital collections are don't just cover New York City. They're much more wide ranging. But specific to Milstein, there are these photographic views of New York City. Now there's Long Island stuff on there too, but if you're researching the history of a building and you want to see what an old building looked like or an old block, you would be well informed by the digital collections. And I'll talk about those in a minute. We also have this collection of real estate photos that are on microfilm. A real estate photographer took, that was his business, and then he donated it to the Milstein division, and it has its own cataloging arrangement. These scrapbooks that were done from old newspapers back in the day that are arranged by locale, Fifth Avenue, Broadway, things like that. We have a huge postcard collection that covers the entire US, but bulk New York City and New York State. When you are searching the digital collections, and it's if you just Google NYPL digital collections, you get the homepage. It's arranged by these different categories, not just, the Milstein's collections are just one small portion there. Well, small, but given that there's a bazillion images on there. If you were researching a building in NYPL digital collections, the images are excuse me, are described not by the address, but by the cross streets. So you have to put in the cross streets. And so my example here, 7th, if you're looking for 42nd Street between 7th and 8th Avenue, you put in 7th and 42, or 8th, the numeral 8th, and 42nd. So you gotta play around with it. But I'm just kind of giving you a sense of how to research this stuff. And also this is part of the research method, because you say, oh, well, I put an address in and I didn't find anything. Well, you got to know how to keyword search some of these resources and how to approach them in general. The catalog. So there's 2 points of entry when it comes to accessing material or browsing material in the library collections. If you want to get a sense of what the library has, the first way is the catalog, catalog.nypl.org. Or if you Googled research catalog NYPL, but it's catalog.nypl.org. This is the point of entry for all the books, pamphlets, newspapers, all the printed stuff, and the archival material, the primary sources that the library has. There's a lot. So you can start with a keyword search, an author's name or a locale, Long Island history. Right? You can also use the advanced search function. It's always good to use the advanced search function anytime you're researching a database, because you have all these different options to narrow down your search. Once you find things, it gives you the location, where are they, which library. There's 4 main research libraries, and then there's 88 branch libraries. And the difference between the research libraries and the branch libraries is that in the branch libraries, you can check out books and bring them home. In the research libraries, you check out the books, but they are non-circulating. You can't take them home. You have to access everything on site. You have to come in, find what you're looking for, you put in a call slip, they scan your library card, the pages will pull the material. Sometimes, it usually takes about half hour, 40 minutes or so, because all the collections are in our underground stacks underneath Bryant Park, which is the park behind the library, if anybody has been here at 42nd and 5th. So that's the difference. You say, well, what do you mean research libraries versus branch? Research libraries, things stay here. So browse the catalog. And when you're in the catalog and you're keyword searching, you find a title, note the subject headings. Each item in the library collections is assigned subject headings. And these are these official sort of authority headings that describe the item, and they're hyperlinked so that when you click on the subject heading, you'll see everything else that falls underneath that subject. And that's a way to find what, to a much more, a broad extent, what the library has on a certain subject. So you can always email us, asking more about the research catalog. Excuse me, catalog.nypl.org. And so I'm going to wrap things up here because I've been prattling on for almost an hour here, and I want to leave time for people's questions. The other point of entry are the databases. The databases page, if you just Googled NYPL databases, you would get to the databases page. They're updating it right now, so I don't want to go into too much of it as far as finding things, but you can browse all the genealogy databases. You can see the ones that are available from home with a library card, and the ones that you have to have, you have to come in to access. But when it comes to genealogy databases, and you want to get a sense of what NYPL has, well, sure, Ancestry, but most libraries have Ancestry. However, Ancestry can be tricky to navigate. What you're looking for can be in there, but you're not finding it because you're not navigating it right. Who's going to help with that? Librarians. Fold 3 is very good with military records and good with naturalizations. Find My Past, you can only access here at the library. That has its advantages. It's like an Ancestry, but there's certain things on there that Ancestry doesn't have. Like I was saying earlier, tons and tons of newspapers. Don't, always keep in mind newspaper databases. So these are the real meat and potatoes as far as the ones that we are constantly having patrons gravitate towards. So when you think about what is the digital access that the library has, these databases, Ancestry, Fold 3, newspapers. Always keep in mind guidebooks. Here's some examples here. The source is a broad, giant tome, whereas you have something there like on the left, which is just devoted to the census, right? Only censuses in the eastern states, right? Ones by race, by ethnicity, by gender. Make sure that you email us if you have any questions, history@nypl.org. There's Keanu Reeves, there's John Wick in the stacks in room 121 in the Milstein division where they shot the movie. Of course, I wasn't here at the time, but so anybody have any questions? I know I almost ate up the whole hour here, but if you have any questions, now's the time to ask. Otherwise, you can always email us. All right.
Andy, did you mention at the beginning of the program that I think you guys are offering other virtual programs? Do you have,
Right.
You mentioned city directories and.
Well, right now we're not. So what
Okay.
happened was during the quarantine, the library was closed to patrons and we were working from home. We were doing monthly classes up until June. And then we were preparing for the library to reopen, which right now it's open to the public. You can just walk right in. And so we're working on whether we're going to still do the online classes or whether they are going to be on-site only. So we're kind of in like an in-between. However, actually, let me do this. I am going to, let me open up another tab. Can you see, is my screen still shared here?
Oops, I'm sorry, let me minimize. No, I'm still seeing the slideshow.
Okay, all right. So I am going to put in the chat a link to our Getting Started in Genealogy research guide. And in that guide, there are there's links to a handful of former online classes that were recorded.
Oh, great.
That you can watch. I should have put this in here earlier. Here. And so if there's any questions in the Q&A or chat, just let me know.
Yep, there are actually two there. One person wanted to know if it's possible to get a library card if you're not a New York resident, and can they use digital contents if they don't live in New York?
If you right, so if you don't live in New York State right now, you can't get a library card by filling the form out online. I don't want to confuse everyone, but so if you come into the library and you're from Florida or New Jersey or wherever, not New York State, and you have a driver's license, you can fill out the form and get a temporary library card that's 3 months. But excuse me, you can't do that if you live outside of New York State, and and filling out the form online. Okay. And so in that sense, the online databases that you can access from home with a library card, you wouldn't be able to access. So essentially, if you're outside of New York State, you have to be on site to get the library card.
And there is a second question from Julia. She saw her grandfather's naturalization paper through a program. Is it possible to view his picture?
Well, as his picture, that's a whole nother, that's a subject you can devote an entire, at least an hour to, if not like a semester, because there's only so many places a photo might be taken. And that's where the newspaper might come in. Maybe there was a photo published with an obituary in a local newspaper. If he naturalized and then got a passport, you could try to maybe, depending on the year of the passport, a passport has a photo of the individual in it, but that's where you got to think, like, what would have his photo, and often it's, that's family collections, if somebody saved it or in a scrapbook or whatever, there's only a handful of places that someone's photograph would appear. And so I put in the chat a link to that. Here, I didn't do it to all attendees. There's a link to our Getting Started in Genealogy research guide. And in that, there are a handful of videos from my colleagues on different subjects that can kind of act as a stand-in right now to our online programming. But you can always email us or check back in with the website to see what future programming is scheduled.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any other questions? You could put them in the chat or the Q&A feature, either one. All right. Okay, well, all right, well, I think that's it. All
right, well,
we have a couple of thank yous in there. Thank you, everybody, for logging in, and thank you, Andy, so much for all this great information.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm glad, I'm always glad to promote the division, to talk local history, it's really talking about research. And I hope, I want to get the point across that, ask questions. It's often less about the material than it is the research method. But the research methods, it's what gets you to the material and gets you really using it. You're really bringing it for what it's worth, right? Every last, bit of information. And so, yeah, thanks again, and be in touch, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, and this program is being recorded, and we'll post it probably sometime tomorrow to our YouTube page, and I just put that link in there. It's mcpl.tv. So we'll post this probably sometime tomorrow, and there's some other great library programming as well on there. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, Andy. Have a great day.
All right, you too.
All right, thanks for doing this. All right, we'll see you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.